Hey, everybody. This is Jon Love with Beyond the Drip. I want to thank you and welcome you to this month's episode. We're really excited to have our guest, Eric Hill, co-founder of AvevoRx with us. Also, obviously, always have my co-host here, Brandon Carpenter of MedEdge, Pam McIntyre of Infusion Nursing Consultants, and then Brian O'Sullivan from the O'Sullivan Group. Hey, everybody. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Absolutely. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us. We're really excited a little bit. I want to start out, and really, I think this is mostly going to be us thinking about your story in infusion and where you are now. And so quickly, let me give a quick rundown and maybe if I get something wrong, you can correct me. But when I first met you back in my Rock Pond Solutions days, obviously I think you had a deep relationship with Brandon. You were the co-founder of BioRx. And I remember BioRx being just such a great leader in the specialty infusion market nationwide and just fast growing. And then, of course, there was acquisition and all of that. I thought maybe we'd start out just maybe the first 5 minutes and just hear that story. Like, how in the world did you get into infusion? Is that something you did? You knew you were going to do it, or did you step into it? We'd love to hear that story.
Like most of us, when I was in middle school, I decided I really want to get into home. This is a wild story. I got out of college. I took a job selling office equipment, almost door to door, selling dictation equipment, mostly to doctors and lawyers. And healthcare recruited out of there. I went to work for Baxter for about a year and a half, and then I went to work for a home infusion company in Charlotte at 22 in sales. And I never left. So I kind of got my 10,000 hours in. The old saying, can't be professional till you do your 10,000 hours. I got them in pretty early. At 34, a coworker of mine named Phil Riley and I sat down at a McDonald's on Montgomery Road in Cincinnati, Ohio, and looked at each other and said, "What are you doing next?" And he said, "I'm not working for anybody. This is my last job." He said, "What are you doing next?" I was like, "I'm probably not working for anybody else. This is my last job." We were both junior executives at Quorum. And we sat there one morning over a cup of coffee and decided we were going to start an infusion company. That was in 2003. We business planned for about a year, left and started our company BioRx. It was headquartered in Cincinnati. Dispensed our first gram of IVIG in July of 2004. So,
it's funny to hear, it's funny to hear founders. Every time I talk to a founder, Eric, they tell me they know when they did their first gram. How important is that moment for you when you look back? Because obviously, we're all getting older, right? We're all like, when you look back to that moment, it's funny that you would, that specific nature. You're all like that. You remember that month and day. How important is that moment?
I will tell you that it's not as important in retrospect as it was terrifying. We were both 34. We bet everything, right? We secured lines of credits with our houses. Our wives probably didn't know the extent that we were extended, and he tells people that I threw up every day for about 3 years, which I did in fact throw up in the parking lot of Anthem Healthcare because he owed us $1 million in 2006, and we didn't have $1 million to be owed because they were having a systems problem. And I was with my director of reimbursement at the time, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I just need a minute. And I walked behind my car and I threw up in the parking lot. And then we went in and met with their lawyers and their provider relations people, because I knew if we didn't get the money, I didn't know where we were getting $1 million from.
Yeah. I think, Brandon, I'll have you jump in here. I know the BioRx story as much as anybody. You have any specific questions about that growth and how it happened and why it happened?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about, right, is you mentioned you were in North Carolina. Why Cincinnati?
Man, this podcast is not long enough to tell you the whole story. There's like this serendipitous list of events that occurred, almost like dominoes that fell that we never expected to fall. We had an operating partner that was located in Charlotte. We thought we were going to put the business in Charlotte. That person sort of flaked out on us. Phil owned a piece of a respiratory pharmacy in Cincinnati. And while we were doing this, he's like, "Can you help me? This thing's broken. I need somebody up there that can fix this for me." So I called a friend and I said, "Hey, I got a friend that's got a respiratory pharmacy in Cincinnati. It's broken. Do you think you can fix it?" And I was like, "What are you doing right now?" His name is Mark Kessler. He's like, "Well, I'm doing per diem work for a hemophilia pharmacy. I've been doing that for about 5 years." And I was like, "Really? How about you want to start a business with us?" So we brought him in. He lived in Cincinnati. We co-opted some space in the back of a respiratory pharmacy, 1,000 square feet. He came in and helped me get the operational backbone, system setup, things like that to get the company started. So it was just serendipitous, really.
Just an alignment of planets, huh?
It is exactly how it worked.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in North Carolina?
I grew up in Southern Virginia, a small furniture town called Bassett, but I went to school at Wake Forest and Winston-Salem and kind of never went home, So
yeah, man, that's Wake's a great school. Great school. Everybody I meet that went to Wake, they bleed gold there. Yeah. They love Wake.
It's close group.
Yeah. So when you think about where is the point to that acquisition? So if the acquisition happens through Diplomat Specialty, right? And you kind of become Diplomat Specialty Infusion, almost its own arm of, because you had big Diplomat, if I remember back in Flint, right? And that's when they were rocking and rolling, right? It was like, oh, wow. They were the mothership back then. And then they come and inquire you.
Yeah.
Were you done at that point? Did you hang out?
No, we worked. There was an interim step. We did what's called a minority recap. We brought an institutional investor in 2010. So we were about 6 years in, and we sold a small piece of the company. They helped us professionalize the finance. We brought in a CFO at the same time, a high-end CFO, and they brought in some banking and things.
So you were prepping for that, So you did all those pre-steps.
We had taken some chips off the table, and we could swing for the fence using a bank's money and an institutional investor's money. We still owned 64% of the company, I think, when we sold it. So we thought that we wanted to have a transaction, and we felt like the market was right. We thought there could be some regulatory headwinds. Turns out we didn't quite read that crystal ball right, but multiples were high. And we thought that Diplomat, Phil Hagerman, the CEO of Diplomat, I had met him, considered him a friend. I thought they would be a good fit for us culturally, and it turned out that they were. We stuck around for another 4.5 years. And we sold the business to them. We were doing $230 million in revenue and making, had a 10% EBITDA margin. We stuck around for 5 years, and we scaled it to $1 billion. 4.5 years, scaled it to about $1 billion.
Wow.
At 800 employees. And when we sold the whole corporation to Optum, the infusion business really was driving the entirety of the earnings for the corporation.
Yeah. No, I remember that. I remember that. If you looked at that, you were like, everybody, you kind of had the North and the South. The South was the Cincinnati, and you were like, listen, everybody's bullish on the South. The North was just tanking, and just that hard thing. So rounding out kind of this area, you sell to that, and then what then? Did you go get on a boat somewhere for a little while, or did you golf? What
I think it was in 2020 we sold the entire Diplomat Corporation to Optum, Division of United Healthcare. We stuck around and did sort of an integration tour for about 6 months with the understanding that we would exit the company. And so we had a year to burn off, and we took a year off. So I took a year off. I moved to the Bahamas. And realized if I didn't get back to work, I was going to weigh 400 pounds and probably have to check into Betty Ford.
So okay, that's going to lead to our next question, right? Because, you sit around as a young leader and everybody talks about, hey, I want to get to the end here. They've all built to sell, right? That little book. They all have that envelope in their desk. I got a number, right? And, I guess, is that what's driving you to come back and create Avevo? Why does a guy who, I'm going to make some assumptions here, can do whatever he wants? I think about payers, lawyers, liability, just pain in the ass. Why come back and say, hey, look around and fire at somebody? You want to do it again? Yeah, I want to do it again. Why?
John and everybody else watching this thing, what are you going to do if you don't do something? I think at the end of the day, you're right. Phil and I, neither one had to work. We perceived that he and I had one more go in something. And we started thinking about what it was we wanted to do. We have other business interests as well, but they're not full-time day jobs. And we had some young people around us that we thought could take a startup and allow us to mentor is not the right word because they're rock stars in their own rights already. We could prepare them to take this business over at some point in time, or possibly help them to build the financial underpinnings that they might want to have, and we could kind of tag along, lead them for a while. We also thought that the market was beginning to consolidate. We got lucky the last time we did this because the market had done a lot of consolidation, so there was this vacuum. The market was begging for kind of a nimble, scrappy provider or several that could come in and just do a better job. And we perceived that was getting ready to happen again, and it did. We were right. I think we were right. I think the market has done a tremendous amount of consolidation, and felt like we were going to walk right into another kind of small mid-market cap vacuum.
Yeah. Are you having fun going again?
I'll tell you, I am. I'm working a little bit more than I want to work right now, but I'm having a blast. And I'll tell you, It's a rocket ship. We're a 2x the pace we were last year. Last time we did this, and I thought the last time we did this, we were growing at a pace that was stupid crazy and almost scary because we were having to the need for access to capital, all the things you have to do to think 2.5 years, 3 years out versus today, and this one's even going faster. So it's interesting. It's different, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's all the fun and no throwing up in a parking lot. I like it.
Correct.
I like it, Eric.
I haven't thrown up from work-related ulcer at all.
That's fair. I'm going to start out with our guest, Pam. I know you've got some questions, Avevo here, going back into Avevo, you got some questions. I'll let you kind of kick off and we'll go from.
Absolutely. First of all, I commend you because I think you're right. We all got to do something. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm thinking, what am I going to do next? It is, I think, to have the luxury of time to consider what is it I really want to do is a gift. What makes what you're doing now, what makes Avevo different than your other company? Strikes you as like the magic sauce?
I got to tell you, we've not reinvented the wheel. The magic sauce is exactly the same magic sauce that we had back there. And you guys know this, and I think everybody that's run a business knows this. Really simple stuff. People answer the telephone. The same person talks to the patient all the time. They don't get caught in an electronic computer tree. We do everything we can to make it as easy as possible for referral sources. That's just old stuff. It's not new. When markets consolidate, that's the first thing that goes. People on the front line go, making it easier for your referral source to talk to less people, have less pieces of paper to push, and making sure your patients actually can get on the phone with whoever they're supposed to be on the phone with. One phone number, one person. That's pretty much it. It's not harder than that. Oh, and you got to go out and get the right box at the right place at the right time on the right day. And the nurse has got to get the start and know what she or he is talking about when they're in the home. That seems like it's minimum expectation. You've managed a nurse all over the country. Sometimes that's not what happens in home.
Well, it's harder than it seems. And I think the next thing I'm going to go into is oncology, because as things evolve and all the new specialty products, oncology is kind of my baby. Having a foot in both canoes, especially in oncology. And I do see there's going to be this big shift in the market where oncology biologics are going to move into alternate sites, AICs, and home. And how can we prepare? My job right now, in a lot of cases, is preparing companies that have their own nursing to take care of those patients because it's coming. What do you see as an advantage that you can put forward that would make that easier for your patients? And do you see it as viable?
Well, related to oncology, what I see is that I'm happy I've got your phone number now because I probably need to talk to you about making sure that we can participate in some of these new drug entrants in the market. I think the challenge is related to oncology, but it's also a bigger I think issue is that the pace which newly developed infusible drugs are entering the market is, I don't know if it's order of magnitude higher than it was last time I'm in this business, but it is at a pace that we can't keep up with it at our scale. Like we think we could hire 2 or 3 more FTEs at $400-300 grand a year just to do drug pipeline work and do external and internal reach about, all right, which classes, therapeutics, and subspecialties do we want to go into next? Knowing that there are we look for hidden gems, right? And then put the clinical underpinnings in order to actually do it and to get the sales team to actually harvest the relationships. So I don't have the answer. We don't have the answer for that. We're drinking from a fire hose, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can. We're very, very, very selective about the therapeutic classes, even the drug brands that we're willing to administer. We have kind of an algorithm that tells us whether or not it's something we're willing to do. And not the least of that is the nursing component in the field, because we know what happens when that doesn't go right. Yeah. And look, we've gone from 0 to 200 nurses in 36 months, and we'll probably have 400 nurses in the next 18 months, maybe even 12. Just the human resources capacity and the management talent capacity we have to have just to do our nurse recruiting, onboarding, training, credentialing, and making sure that we got great nurses out there. It's monumental. And then I got to tack on that. Well, they either have to be, they got to have monoclonal antibody experience in rheumatology or GI, or they got to have oncology experience. And I got a market where transplant is interesting to us right now because we have some relationships. Well, now I got a whole nother recruiting class for nursing. It's an impossible task, in my opinion. Made a whole lot worse by COVID and the spike in payroll costs.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. One thing I found, though, the leap from training oncology nurses to specialty nurses is a lot less than it is trying to convince and then train a nurse that does specialty products to oncology.
I think you're right.
So that's been a really good thing for a lot of my clients. Do you see that what you're doing now, did you start this company because you felt there was a need in a market, or is it because you knew you could do it and you could do it again? Was there anything there?
I think people ask me what I like about what I do. And I said, it's got to be one of the few jobs in the world where you can do good and you can do well at the same time. Mm-hmm. When we started this, the group, we have 5 founders in this company, 4 actively founder managers in the business right now. I believe we all thought that there was a high likelihood, nothing's ever for sure, but there was a high likelihood that we would succeed, or that if we failed, we would fail small. Maybe the growth rate wouldn't be there that we're experiencing. Maybe this would be a slow grower. We'd have a lot more barriers to entry than we thought we would have. So I think it was a combination of things. One, we thought we could probably do this and it not completely be a bust and we all go bankrupt or whatever would happen. But we also thought we've gotten a taste of what big companies feel like, both on the delivery and the receiving end, and we're seeing consolidation. And there are patients we know. We knew 30 alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency patients that had just fallen off therapy. Nobody was calling them back. They couldn't get anybody processing off. They couldn't get limited distribution drug. And we're like, we know these people. We've known these patients for years, and they're calling our friends and going, I'm off drug. I can't get on drug. And so we like, I think we can do this, not low risk, but moderate risk. And we probably actually get to help some people along the way. So
yeah,
why wouldn't you do that?
Pam, it's funny. Now, I don't want to get sued here, so we're going to name some, but we talk about the groups that are vertically integrated that are out buying folks, right? And then the phone are ringing, right? And folks are saying no one's getting taken care of, right? And there's just this weight being left of an opportunity for people to walk in, right? We see it all the time.
It always happens that the companies that get snapped up, they have that reputation for excellence. And the common denominator that I find is somebody picks up the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But I'll tell you what else happens, Pam, is those people in there, and I'll preach this forever. The people in there who are used to excellence will not hang out in these giant box stores and they'll leave. Yeah. They're like, they can't. There's something inside of them that they just can't. They can't just be bad at it. They were like raised to do well, and those folks are like, and they're like, they'll call me and they'll say, John, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. Like we're in a mess now and I can't even go to work without, I'm breaking into hives here. Like, like I can't, you love those type of people, so Brandon, I'm going to go to you and switch over a little bit really around, tech really, like, right. Yeah. The tech, let's see, we had Eric, am I right? So old school was CPR Plus. Now you're probably on like Care 10 or something like that. Right. And like, Brandon, that's your world. You want to talk a little bit about tech between those two worlds?
So, I mean, you talk about it, Eric, and you're like, we get people and we talk with folks who can't get on therapy and trying to scale. I mean, 200 nurses in 36 months. That's well done.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. So, but what's really interesting, and obviously we know CPR Plus is, coming to its final days here at the end of the year. I imagine back in the day, finding people who, knew the system and everything. I mean, especially when I think about Cincinnati, right? Like there was so many people in the Ohio area who knew CPR Plus. CPR Plus was, out of Columbus, all this kind of stuff. That must have been real easy. And now with the new technologies, the new systems that are out there, and more people seem to be retiring out of the industry than coming into the industry. Like from a skill set, from that perspective, what kind of, challenges are you having? Like, now nobody understands, not even the system we're using, not let alone, the industry.
You would think our industry would have better technology than it does. I think 2016 called and said they want Care 10 back. 2004 called and said they want CPR Plus back. Right. I don't know, man. It is what it is. I know that there's probably folks that are using technology more advantageously than we are. We're a 300 employee company that treats a few thousand patients. Our IT budget is not that of Caremark or somebody else's.
Right.
So there's probably somebody that's skinning the cat a little bit better than us. We don't see an easy path. I do hope that we're smart enough to get some young blood in the company, and I think we do have some senior management that's, they're in their 30s who can see past maybe where Phil and I can, that, have a a tolerance for taking risk on plugging some AI into the company in the next couple of years and taking risks and being able to see beyond and around corners that we can't because we're just old.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, right? Because one of the things I really picked up on is like, hey, somebody answer the phone, make it easy for referral sources, all that. But then you know, we're in generation AI now, right? And everybody's like, how do we plug in AI? And some of the first things we're seeing is AI is answering the phone, AI is coordinating with these patients. So how do you see yourself holding true to those core values, but still trying to manage, the technology and stuff? Because let's be honest, people aren't getting cheaper, right? And so to hold true to that, somebody's got to answer, like, there's got to be a give and take. So what are you seeing?
I hope that's not my lifetime. I think there's two ways to make people cheaper. One is to offshore it, and the other one is replace them with robots. You would have a better crystal ball than we've looked at verbal chat bots and AI bots. There's some products in the market already that we think we like to potentially adopt that are making outbound phone calls, iterative calls to insurance carriers, checking benefits and things like that. I think that's first. It's happening right now already in the industry. We test drove a couple. With respect to AI, we're still flushing that out. We're going to hire an AI person. We're going to hire a university to do a study, and then we're going to hire a person probably in 26. Would be my guess, or either bring a firm in to counsel us and work inside. It feels to us like the things that can be done earlier are clinical monitoring, things that are running in the background that don't have a verbal interaction with an actual patient. From our perspective, that'll probably be the last thing that goes. I don't think we want to make a clinical decision, but we can have them doing clinical surveillance. We're using public AI right now to write a couple letters of medical necessity and do a little bit of research for us. We have nurses obviously to sit for them and check it. Little mundane tasks like that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not the guy to answer that question really.
No, it's just interesting because obviously, like you said, we want to answer the phone. We want to have a person answering that phone and all that kind of stuff. So, and then it's really interesting. You were talking about the amount of drugs that are in the pipeline and everything. Obviously back in the day at BioRx, I remember when, things like Alpha-1 and Berinert and all those types of things were just starting to come out and dealing with some of just the operational data capture and all that. With that amount of drugs that you're taking on and everything, what are some of the struggles, especially with kind of the rules that manufacturers used to have compared to today? Because one of the things that we see is nobody asks for less data, right? They always want more data. And so what's some of the things that you've seen operationally that has been a real struggle to manage all?
Two things, more than two things. Two things come to mind. I talked about my little do we do this algorithm? We'll look at drugs, specific drugs and drug classes to make decisions if we want to be in it. If we're going to be in it, let's go and go hard. If we're not, or we want to nibble around the outside, let's don't bother with it. We have plenty to do. The universe of drug therapies is large enough, but we're super disciplined. I would say two things. One is, can we do this drug clinically, efficaciously, right? Or are we capable of doing the drug safely and on scale? And the second thing is, can we make money doing it? And I don't mean the type of money that just keeps the lights on. We have to have an actual operating margin. And I think few people, that, especially in startups, really understand the amount of gross margin they need to maintain an operator net income margin. And they really don't understand the iterative use of cash. The amount of cash that you have to grow growing AR and inventory in a growing company is substantially larger than most people understand. So the lower that margin is, the greater the need for cash, because you have to park cash in your AR and your inventory. Young entrepreneurs don't get that. I learned it the hard way, right? I was like, we are borrowing a tremendous amount of money, and the banker's like, yeah, you're growing at like 400% a year. Eric, you idiot, you got all this AR you got to fund, and you got all this inventory you have to fund now. You need a lot of cash. And I'm like, but we're profitable. He's like, well, yeah, on paper. And then, well, how about if you were 3% more profitable, you would use 30% less cash? And I'm like, well, somebody should have probably told me that before we started this thing. We look for, that's our two item test, right? Can we do it clinically, and then can we actually have a gross margin that covers up not only operations but produces a margin or income that eventually will produce cash for the company, so we can actually, get paid. But the things that are hard right now is that there's a lot of crap to weed through to find out whether or not drug X that's coming on the market meets those two criteria. You think it'd be easy? It's not easy. And then the data thing is interesting. Because a lot of these new infused drugs, especially biologics, they're coming out, and they're not like some of the drugs we saw with biologicals early on, where the market cap of a drug might be 100 million or 300 million. These are multi-billion-dollar drugs coming out. And the large drug manufacturers, the biotech drug companies, them being interested in working on a data agreement for money with a pharmacy our size is, all right, I've got what's going to be a 10 or 15 billion dollar drug within 36 months, and you want to sell me data? How about if you like my drug, you got to give me data, or whatever the relationship is, or gee, we really want your salespeople motivated to work with us, so we need sales tracing data pushed to you. Well, I can't find the guy in the tower anywhere who can tell me how to get that done. That didn't really used to be the case. I felt like it was a lot easier to figure out how to integrate data, whether we got paid for it or not, with the drug companies.
Yeah,
But yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, and now that we talk a little bit about, I want to go back to the payer side with Brian. Brian, it feels like Eric is not the only one who's ever wanted to throw up or thrown up in a payer's parking lot, right? Right. I would say, Brian, and I'm sure you got questions, but I want to, right now, I can't find a more adversarial feeling out there than providers and payers right now in the infusion market, right? So you deal with payers all the time. Certainly, you got a guy here who made this amazing run, and then came back in. You got to have questions around, the payer side.
I think we have fun as a group here when we do topics, right? But I think one of the things that makes this podcast interesting is the guests, right? There's always a surprise. So Eric, in my opinion, you made the highlight reel. This thing, I'm just in my head, I've got this of, you're there with your director of revenue cycle, you're going to a meeting. Anthem has literally your life or death in your hands, right? They have $1 million that you don't have to continue the business. Like, time out, I need a sec, I'm going to go hurl. Like that's a real life story that you can't make those up. I mean, you paid those dues, so to speak, of having to deal with that. So, those early days when Anthem owed you $1 million, maybe you didn't have all your payer contracts, so you kind of built street credibility, payer by payer, market by market, as you grew and consolidated from single state to multi-state. What are the lessons? And I've got a follow-up question to that, but what are the lessons learned of would you have done things differently? Starting out there with the payers.
In 2004?
Yeah, in 2004, because they're different than they are today, 20 years later. But
it's a completely different animal. I would have liked to have had more cash, and I would have hired a payer team, dedicated payer team, earlier in the life cycle of the company. It felt like an expense to us, and it probably was, because they're not cheap, man. We even today, I take a big breath before we write the check to bring additional payer people on. I would have done it earlier then, and it was a lot more common. We had a lot more major medical claims than we do today. Still have a lot, but it was a lot more difficult to get paid. It's a DSO perspective than it is today. In our experience, that's just my experience. I would tell young entrepreneurs or people that are starting companies, people place less value on out-of-network claims volume. They just do. When they're valuing your corporation, if you go to sell it or raise money, your out-of-network percentage is real. And if it's high, you get a penalty. They may not tell you get a penalty, but you get a valuation penalty for it. So it's important, even if you're making a little bit more money in a market, although we're not finding that in very many places where we can make more money out of network than in network right now. We've taken the approach that it's just not something we want to deal with. So we do almost no out of network. Maybe it might be 1% some patient somewhere. And we took a shot on a Blue Cross case that the doc really wanted us to take care of the patient. The patient's having a hard time, whatever. It's not in our normal course of business.
Now, Eric, is that different from 2004?
Yes. Yeah, we had.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought someone had told me that you guys basically were almost strongly for the first 2 or 3 years out of network.
We did a whole lot of out of network cases. We didn't have contracts, but you have to remember in 2004, 5, 6, 7, high deductible plans didn't exist. Max out of pockets were still there. Payers were paying claims at rates that were on par or better than their network or par providers back then. That's changed. The mechanisms they use to adjudicate those claims, not all payers, but most of them, especially the Blues, now use different mechanisms to adjudicate claims. We also, the home plan issue where you could have Blues plans crosswalk claims, a lot more, we don't do that now. It's a lot more difficult to navigate than it was then. That kind of sort of went away in 2018, 19 for the most part. So it is very different. But I will tell you, by the time we got the business sold to Diplomat, we were 97, 98% in network. It took us 14 years to get from where we were to there. We just made the decision that if we had to, we'd grow this company slower, but we'd invest more in contracting up front. Turns out we really have to grow slower. Our in-network rate is high 90s now. But our percentage of pharmacy claims is a lot higher. When I left, probably we sold the company in 2015 or 16 to Diplomat, our pharmacy claims percentages were 35% of all of our claims were RX versus medical claims, and now it's probably flipped. I don't know the exact number right now, but it's got to be more pharmacy claims than medical claims for us right now. For the non-professional service, of course, not nursing and per diem.
Right. Yeah.
So 20 years later, you've built and sold a company, sold it to Optum. You're not the only company that Optum's bought. Anthem, Evolence is in this space as well as in AICs. So, you're dealing with payers that to some degree are competitors now. Clearly with CVS being in this space. That dynamic plus now you're Eric Hill who sold a company to Optum. Do you just walk in and the payers are roll out the red carpet and forget that you threw up 20 years ago? That all of a sudden now you just walk in and you can ask for national contracts, or is it still you start off low on the totem pole and you've got to build just as if you've never done it before?
I've never walked in anywhere and somebody just, well, gee, Eric, we'd love to contract with you.
I just thought I'd ask my question. I've never had it.
You never know. He thought you had some juice, Eric. He thought you know who I am?
In fact, our payer guys don't really want me in those calls because I've butted heads with a couple of those guys over the years. So no, but I do think two things. One, remember me talking about accretive vacuums or acquisition vacuums that have occurred in the market? It's happened. Look, Optum's closed a lot of their branches. They probably fired 50% of their people in the last 24 months. Quorum basically is closing all their branches. They terminated 85% of their employees. When we see these big acquisitions by fully integrated plans, I haven't seen it happen. I will bet you that Elevance has got a massive integration, untenable integration task in front of them. I don't bet you. I know it. I've been on the other side of it. I know what it's like. They will have macro issues putting there's three companies together in the next 12 months. Somebody's not going to be happy about that. Patients, nurses, pharmacists. Yeah. It doesn't matter. They can do the very best job in the world, and I suspect they'll do a good job. But there's going to be $300 million worth of infusion business that falls off the side, and they won't even know it's occurred, and they're not going to be Anthem insured. You can mark if I'm wrong, I'm not wrong by a lot. I will bet you that much infusion care will fall outside of that massive integrative process. They've just got too much, and they've got this backlog of all the stuff that they had already in their provider network. They need guys like us to fill the gaps. They just do. They will.
Yeah.
The hard thing is to get them to pay for it. I would say the one thing that we do different than a lot of people in the marketplace is we are so disciplined and stingy about signing agreements. Our payer guys hate working for me because I tell them no. Like, I am not signing that. You can tell me 42 times that you want me to sign that, but I'm not signing it. Not at those rates. You either got to find a way to get the rates up, or we just tell them thanks but no thanks. Let's go back in a year and see what's going on. And it makes it hard because we have to walk away from things. But I say no to more managed care contracts than I say yes to.
Eric,
just did it today.
I think that is so incredible. And I want to sit down just for a second. Brandon and I have something we say to each other all the time. We cannot outperform a bad agreement. And said, no matter how, and you're like, and I tell him, listen, I understand that she's the prom queen, but we cannot outperform a bad agreement. And so just for a second, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, sit down and tell us, as someone who's done this, completed it, and came back, Like, why is that true? And to the young man or woman out there saying, listen, I need this date with this prom queen, right? This is so-and-so, or this is so-and-so, right? This is the big relationship. And like, why that could be your doom and you don't know it. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes on that concept, because I just, everybody wants to have that relationship without knowing that relationship on the wrong terms will kill you.
Yep. We still have the same. We were talking to salespeople because they've never met a dollar revenue they didn't like, including me, by the way.
It's fair. It's fair.
But, we say, we're not going to participate in the General Motors model of pricing. And they're like, what's that mean? I was like, we'll just make it up on volume. General Motors made cars that cost them $9,000 that they sold for $7,000 for eons. And guess what? It didn't work. It doesn't work. Our cost of unit of production is our cost of unit of production. I won't share what ours is, but we know what it is. And it doesn't matter how much of it you sell. You cannot take our fixed costs and absorb them and have incremental gross margin fall off as the income. It doesn't work. Most of our costs in this business are what generally accounting guys would call semi-fixed. They're not fully fixed except for a few which make up this much of our infrastructure. Right. They're semi-fixed. Almost every department. So, we have gross margin targets in our therapeutic classes that we think we have to hit. So I've often heard, I've heard a lot of people in our industry say, isn't some margin better than no margin? And the answer to that is absolutely not. Yeah. Get a calculator, get a better calculator. If you're doing acute infusion, you need 30% gross margins, probably to break even, 34, 35, 45. Right. If you're doing specialty infusion, you probably need 22% gross margins. You probably need 15 to 16 to draw a zero, and the cash that you're going to burn to draw a zero is just mind-boggling. It's not going to be worth it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think that lesson, and listen, we're going to put this on the podcast. We're going to put it out. Hundreds of people are going to listen to it. And still, Brandon, there's going to be 4 to 5 to 6 people who are going to say, "Now I'm going to try it." Because, I had an old mentor tell me that he said, life is a terrible teacher, but it's the only class a fool will take. There's just some of y'all have to get a whooping. And that's my Southern coming out, because you will not be told. Yeah. You're going to have to experience what it's like when you say, I really wish I wasn't in this contract. I wanted it so bad, but they want it, Eric. They're like, oh, I got to have the Anthem contract. And you're like, but on what terms? And so, yeah, that's so very helpful, so very helpful. Man, turning the corner here. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I think it's the most frustrating thing about our industry. People don't understand their cost, and not that we know everything about it, that they will sign agreements that they probably don't know that they're going to lose money on, and it makes it just makes the dimension.
Oh gosh, don't even get Pam started. Don't get Pam started on the absolutely unprofitable nature of all nursing ventures in infusion right now. It's a nonprofit at this point. It's a 501c3. Post-COVID, nurses, they've got Louis Vuitton and bless their heart, right? But they're carrying Louis, all right, because they can get what they want, right?
They're going, I don't think all the nurses are carrying Louis Vuitton bags.
Well, listen, they can, because the market demands that, right? That's what happened, and it's not their fault, right? They work hard. It's just incredible, and we need them, and they recognize, I think rightly so, probably to Eric's chagrin, that they're worth a lot. So they're like, hey, I'm an asset here, and I'm worth a lot. So, I agree, Brian. Hey, so I want to switch really quick because, again, we're so thankful that you join us and talk about, and we've covered so many amazing things. And the last question before we get into a couple personal things is, you're scaling. Are you in 20 states now? Is that where you are? Somewhere like that? Or somewhere in the 20s?
We're in 30 some states now. We're covering 2% of the U.S. population. Our biggest white space right now is Texas, and we're doing a little bit of business in the New England market. If I could find an acquisition in Boston, anybody out there have one, please call me. We would love to buy something in Boston.
I knew there was a reason you took this podcast. That was it right there. Yeah. Like, man, there's a Boston little small IVIG shop. He was like, hey, thinking back to the BioRx days that you scaled out, and now to AvevoRx, as you look to scale, you find markets. What are you looking for that maybe was different then? Are you looking for the same? Or are you saying, no, now what shifts geographically for you?
Our regulatory and licensing strategy is that we're going to go everywhere eventually, so let's go everywhere now as much as we can without throwing money away. Texas is a great example where we've decided not to go. We've made a buy decision, not a make decision for the most part in Texas, so we haven't applied for licensure there, but everywhere else we're pretty much in there or in works if we think there's human beings there that we can treat. So there's a few states where there's not enough population for us to spend a lot of time. Then the second tier to that is talent. So if we can opportunistically pick up very good talent, we're not in the business of training salespeople. We're in the business of hiring really good salespeople and letting them go make a living.
Yeah.
That's our model. Other people, it's not otherwise model. It's not the only one, but it's ours based on our certain size and scale. And so that will dictate some geography too. Right beside of talent is the payer landscape. So we do have just internal, institutional knowledge of where it's really tough and maybe where it's not quite as tough, or we think maybe the Medicaid plan is good there, or whatever the things are. We've got a relationship with this payer. We think we can ramp up quickly there. Payer team says, yep, no, I got 6 people on my speed dial in that state. If we want to get into X, Y, and Z state, let's go. And then we'll make investment decisions there. When we go into a new state that we're not in, we think it's probably anywhere from $600,000 to $1.5 million of cash investment from the day that we see go to the day that territory actually produces cash. Not revenue and earnings, but cash back to the company. We feel like we're probably going to shovel $500,000 in anyway, at least.
Yeah. And it is surprising to see you grow like that and not tackle Texas, right? You got some giants down there you'll probably have to go get in a boxing match with. So, I assume you'll be there at some point, so it is interesting just seeing though, but that knowledge is so, unique of where you guys are. And I think it's really important that just to say lastly here to all of our listeners, he said before cash, not before revenue. We get so caught up, Brandon, on revenue, Brian, on revenue. And guys, our light bills aren't on with our revenue.
Nope.
They're not. Okay. They're on because of our cash. So if you're thinking like, oh man, I think I can have, $2 million in revenue, like, okay, how much cash? How much actualized cash are we collecting as in, cash collections? And so that's incredibly helpful. And so, this has been so good, Eric, so good. I want to turn finally here as we wrap up to the personal side. I think you've gotten, you've had this just amazing career. I talked to Brandon a little bit doing some research. I want to know a little bit. I've heard that we like boats and maybe climbing some mountains. You got anything you could, talk to us about some stories that, just being in this amazing industry and the infusion, what it's allowed you to do personally?
Boats cost a lot of money and mountains take years off your life. They have a cost as well. It's less about the bucks than it is the wear and tear it puts on your face and your body.
Yeah. I want to hear more about the mountain climbing, though. Tell me about it.
The last thing, I got involved in mountain climbing. Guy that came to work for us named Jeff Salantai. Hopefully, listen to this. One of my favorite humans on the planet. Severe hemophilia A guy. And he came to work for us in our hemophilia group. And we were at a sales meeting one day, and he was telling about his adventures. He's a super outdoorsman, and he had tried to climb Mount Rainier, and he failed. Not because he did. They weathered out, and it just the climb wasn't right. And I had a buddy who just did it. He called me up and said, Eric, don't do it. It's horrible. Don't do it. So Jeff said he wanted to try it again. I said, well, I'll make a deal with you. I'll sponsor you, but I want to go. And I'd hiked mountains, but I'd never climbed mountain climbing before. And so he and I trained together, and we climbed Mount Rainier. This is a long time ago. I don't know. This is probably 2008 or 9. And he and I developed a relationship, and we backpacked and hiked over the world. I infused him at 12,000 feet on Kilimanjaro the first time we did that. We got to go do a lot of cool things. I got involved with a hemophilia charity called Save One Life, shameless plug. And we organized a fair number of climbing trips through them, and some are on our own, where we'd go around the world, raise money for Save One Life, maybe smuggle some drugs into the country where they need some hemophilia product, whatever. I'm not saying we did that. Somebody might have done that. And that was the genesis of it. And it's just, it became like this. I'm not consumed with it, but usually once a year, once every 2 years, I would do something. Last thing I just did Mont Blanc and Grand Perdido in the French and Swiss Alps. My son went. Both my boys have climbed with me. There's a picture of Kilimanjaro summit and Uganda, Africa behind me. Both of my sons went on trips there. I just did Mont Blanc and Grand Perdido Perdido. We saved one life, group of young hemophiliacs. It may have been my last great mountain climbing adventure. I'll hike some other things, but man, it was a lot. We were put it hard for 6 days, and
Yeah. Time, right?
Yeah.
Time defeats everybody.
Yep.
What? That's amazing, though. Amazing that, the two things that stand out to me is, one, it was one of your great employees that allowed you to get into that, right? Because we talk about our staff is really just such incredible. But two, the industry allowed you to do it. And so, guys, as we think about Beyond the Drip, Beyond the Drip is this idea that we all had that there was so much that went into this amazing industry beyond just putting a needle in someone's arm and dropping it, right? There's these amazing people and stories behind it that are putting up their money, and they're sleeping on their office couches, and nurses are burning up the hours, right? And you've got revenue cycle people who are right now, today, on average, a collection call, you're on hold for an hour and 6 minutes waiting to escalate one call. So Beyond the Drip really is a story, Eric, about everything that goes into infusion beyond just the drip. And you've just been such an awesome guest giving us, and we're so thankful and grateful you've given us a little look behind the curtain on what it looks like to be a leader in that. And so, heartfelt holiday thank you to you. This will be, our December. It will come out the last week of December. And so we're so thankful for all of you who listen to this. And we'll be back in 2025 with our recap in January about 2024, all the things that we felt like the industry was moving toward, all the things that we heard, and the things that we're looking for in 2025. And so we certainly wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays and a happy New Year. And again, to all of you who listen, and to Eric who joined us, thanks for all that you do in our industry. Thanks for, putting your, hand to the plow and doing the hard work. And we're hoping that all together will come out on the other side. So thanks for listening. This is Beyond the Drip, December 2024.
Thanks, Eric.